Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 73 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Now, episode 73 and 74 will be the last two episodes before the EU referendum. So, episode 75, we will be in a whole new arena. So, needless to say, we are going to be discussing certain issues related to the EU referendum in tonight's show and in episode 74, which will be in 2 weeks' time. But first, a great mystery was solved today when I was picking up the newspaper and I saw the front page of the Daily Mail. And here was the headline, Human Organs Grown in Pigs. And when I read the article, of course, it did actually make the observation that critics of this practice say the development of such hybrids is offensive to human dignity. And of course, the DNA of the pig is actually very, very close to that of the human. And, my good friend David Boyle has put forward a very interesting hypothesis on that subject. But I'm not going to go into that tonight. But here is the illustration, and of course this is all part of the conditioning for the general public to start to sow the seeds about hybrid organs. This is part of the sort of transhumanism agenda, but these hybrid organs being used in transplants. Well, of course, the reason that I said that it had solved a mystery was related to this bunch of reprobates. None other than the Bullingdon Club here, of course, and right there we have Mr. Cameron. And, of course, his relationship with pigs came into the public domain last September when the New York Post put it somewhat more succinctly than perhaps the British media, where they stated categorically that David Cameron was accused by, of course, Michael Ashcroft, his former buddy and Tory party treasurer and chairman. So, we can perhaps now start to see why it was that Mr. Cameron went to such, dare I say, lengths. Although, after this did come about, of course, this is what clearly made Ed Miliband somewhat gag on his bacon butty. And I do gather that there is a film about to be made about these escapades. I'm not too sure yet who's playing David Cameron. It'll probably be Hugh Grant. Doing his normal sort of one-dimensional acting, whilst, of course, David Cameron is a one-dimensional politician. So look out for 50 Shades of Pork coming to a cinema probably near you sometime after we come out of the EU. And David Cameron, of course, still trying to recover the situation because of the derogatory comments that were made about the pig family. And of course, this is the book. This is the book where this escapade of Mr. Cameron with the Bullingdon Club was revealed. Call Me Dave, the unauthorized biography. And of course, it was alleged that this was actually Michael Ashcroft getting his revenge for not being given a senior post in David Cameron's cabinet after the last election, having made sure that David Cameron's election campaign was very well funded. In fact, so well funded, of course, that they're currently subject to some further investigation. But, of course, David Cameron has friends, or shall I say influence perhaps, in very high places. And perhaps it shouldn't have come as any great surprise that Michael Ashcroft actually had to miss the launch of the book in the UK because literally within hours after the book was published, he went down with some pretty serious organ failure. Well, perhaps he should have had a pig's head close at hand. And of course, we've got the not only David Cameron here, but also we've got Boris. And well, it doesn't take too much to guess which one was in and which one was allegedly out. or will be out. But if you want to get a little bit more insight into the activities, I think I've mentioned this before in a previous episode of Humanity versus Insanity, then there is a film that was released 2 years ago that I absolutely recommend that you watch, because the script is allegedly not based at all on the activities of the Bullingdon Club, and any link or any similarity between the Bullingdon Club and the events portrayed in this film are, of course, purely intentional, are coincidental. And that film, and I think it's interesting that the film, one of the settings there is at the Bull's Head, but the film is the Riot Club, and I'm sure you can find it online somewhere, but it's well worth watching for a couple of hours and getting an insight into the outrageous behaviour of these filthy, rich, spoilt, rotten offspring of aristocrats who, of course, all believe that they are born into power and have the right to behave in any way they feel inappropriate. And of course, so what was David Cameron really doing? Well, he'd obviously read the academic papers on the powers of the pig, and was simply looking to get some growth on his somewhat challenged member. So pretty obvious what he was doing, but anyway, the mystery is now solved. Do watch the film, The Riot Club. It's a real hoot. Meanwhile, last week we had Pippa King, and we were talking about the UK Stasi state. And this was the graphic that I put up on YouTube to cover last week's episode. Trust is good, surveillance is better. Welcome to the UK Stasi state. And of course, this is, I think, the third or fourth time that Pippa has joined me on Humanity versus Insanity. And each time she is able to shock us with the acceleration of the surveillance agenda in the UK. But it is attacking us from so many angles. But the following day, on the Tuesday of last week, a double-page spread in the Daily Mail, and I can't suggest they stole my headline, because the paper would have gone to print before I put up the graphic. But here was the Stasi spying on children. And it's wonderful to see the lamestream media actually catching up, finally, with the alternative media. And of course, this is relating to the named person scheme. And the subtext there is, it's an Orwellian new scheme. A state snooper for every child in Scotland compiling a dossier on their family life. And it has chilling implications for us all. Well, those implications may be even more chilling than perhaps we had realised. Couple of subtext from the article. GPs and teachers will be made to give information to the named person, the person responsible for the child. And if each child is going to have two named persons, state named persons, and if a family has 4 children, they could potentially have 8 named persons that they have interfering in their family life. And the second headline there was, in their warped eyes, privacy becomes secrets. And this is going to effectively come into being on August the 1st, so less than 2 months from here. And although there is significant outcry in Scotland, and it's going to be interesting to see whether, with the Tories effectively coming second in the Scottish elections, wonder how that could ever happen. It's going to be very interesting to see whether they are actually able to fully implement it. But even if they can't, nonetheless, the thin end of the wedge has been very much driven in, and over the course of time, then it will become effective. And of course, once they're able to introduce it in Scotland, then they will look to extend it elsewhere in the UK. And here's the graphic that I used for that episode. And if you want to see more on that discussion, then go to the Humanity versus Insanity playlist. And it was episode number 66, where my guest was the outstanding Mel Kelly. where we were talking about the implications of this piece of legislation for all Scottish parents, and the children, of course. But actually, you know, we may think that it's limited to Scotland, but unfortunately, there's a lot going on south of the border, and perhaps it's somewhat more surreptitious, because a sort of fairly random conversation that I happened to be having earlier today led me to do a little bit of digging, and I discovered that EDF, Electricité de France, which is a significant utility provider in the UK, and they had an issue over the handling of customer data. And they'd introduced an SAP system. Now, SAP is a system that I certainly was familiar with some 20 years ago. But EDF were looking to implement an SAP data gathering system. And here's the relevant section. This is the team that supports all the business customer operations is now working on delivering predictive rather than reactive insights into the behavior of its 200,000 customers and how better to use resources. For example, deploying customer service staff more effectively based on their hours and calls that come through. So looking at using artificial intelligence effectively to determine when they need extra staff in their call centers. But actually it goes a little bit further than this, because some of EDF's customers have discovered that EDF is actually holding personal data on their files. Now, I'm going to show you how you can ascertain this in a little while. But on the basis that EDF have done it for at least one person, and this is absolutely evidence-backed, then it's a pretty fair bet that they've done it for a lot of other customers as well. Now, what personal data do they have? Now, in this particular individual's case, and this data was achieved through submitting a subject access request, and what was held was the color of their front door, the type of front door, the type of locks installed on the front door, the fact that the house was in good repair, the fact that the garden was well maintained, and various other aspects about the property, including the fact that it was indeed occupied. Now, why on earth would a utility provider need such basic data? Now, consider the possibility that we are not too many years away from the technocratic agenda insisting that smart meters are installed in all properties. And those who resist will have them installed forcibly, in which case the type of locks that are on the front door and the type of construction of the front door might actually come in quite useful. Now, in another case, a householder actually answered the front door. She saw somebody through the glass of the door and discovered the postman taking a photograph of her front door. And when she asked why he was taking a photograph of the front door, his response was, I'm afraid I can't tell you that, ma'am. So what is going on here? We have categoric evidence that EDF are gathering personal data, and now the post office have not responded to the subject access request yet, but nonetheless, it's very clear the post office is doing the same. So we have these agencies out there gathering personal data. Are you comfortable with this? If, of course, you're comfortable, then why are you watching this program? Because clearly you don't care that basically the state is looking to control every aspect of your life. But the reality is the vast majority of you watching this will be concerned. So in the first instance, I would encourage you to start the process of finding out exactly what it is that these companies have on you. So how do you go about that? Well, you submit a subject access request to the Information Commissioner. And this is from the Information Commissioner's website. It's the ICO. Find out how to request your personal information. It says the right to of subject access means that you can make a request under the Data Protection Act to any organization processing your personal data. The Act calls these organizations data controllers. It goes on, you can ask the organization you think is holding, using, or sharing the personal information you want to supply you with copies of both paper and computer records and related information. Organizations may charge a fee of up to £10. £2 if it is a request to a credit reference agency for information about your financial standing only. There are special rules that apply to fees for paper-based health records. The maximum fee is currently £50, and education records, a sliding scale from £1 to £50, depending on the number of pages provided. So let's go back to the utility companies, because it's very, very clear that this is certainly probably more than just EDF and the post office. So don't you think it's about time that we started a campaign? Now, I admit that unfortunately it's £10, but isn't it worth £10 to find out what these companies are holding on you? So take a look at who your utility supplier is, who your water supplier, the post office, and it will certainly create a bit of employment for these companies, because I'm sure they don't have the amount of staff that they need to respond to these requests. And there is actually a time limit. I think it's 30 days. I may be wrong on that. Don't hold me to that one. But there is a time limit by which they have to provide this information, although the post office, for the moment, do seem to be outside of time on that particular request. So this is the technocratic control agenda. It's total control, full spectrum dominance, as it was referred to by the Project for a New American Century in their September 2000 publication of Rebuilding America's Defenses. But don't think for 1 minute that that is restricted to the US, because what we see here is a global agenda being unfolded. So that's the mission. And, please do keep me posted. If you submit a subject data request, when you get a response, if you feel open to sharing it. Obviously, I would never share any detailed personal information, but just the outline, just what information is being held. And I think then once we've got evidence that some apparently fairly generic information is being held, we start asking the question, why? What is the purpose of this information? Okay, well, let's go to the subject in hand, the EU referendum. Now at AV7, which was a little over 3 weeks ago now, I closed the conference on the Monday morning with my presentation, and half of my presentation was absolutely dedicated to the forthcoming EU referendum. So on the basis that it was time sensitive, I have released the 35 minutes that's relevant to this subject. I've released it on YouTube and on Facebook. And this is the graphic that you would be looking for. Now, I just uploaded this 2 days ago on Saturday morning. And as of a couple of hours ago on YouTube, the video had about 4,500 views. It's also on the Alternative View YouTube channel, which it didn't get posted up to until late yesterday. It's had about 500 views there. So we're looking at about a total of 5,000 views on YouTube. But I also posted it on Facebook. This is the graphic that you'll be looking for if you want to find it on either my Facebook pages or the Humanity versus Insanity Facebook page. And as of a couple of hours ago, it had just crept over the 10,000 views. Now, that's not really total views, because unfortunately the video tends to open whenever it is that anybody clicks on the page. So the real number of views is probably a lot less. But in this video, in this presentation, I address the Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda and the fact that Count Coudenhove-Kalergi's missive of, I think it was 1922, the Pan-European Manifesto, and the fact that this document effectively provides the basis of the EU federal agenda. And it is truly remarkable that even the Leave campaign feel that they cannot discuss the Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda. So why is this? There's no conspiracy here. This is absolute fact. And this is information that has, amongst a lot of other information, of course, that has been deliberately withheld, not just from the British people, but from the people right across Europe. Now, I appreciate that there are a lot of people who are doing some extremely good work, particularly in the anti-fracking community, and for varying reasons, they are very much pro staying in the European Union. But I completely understand that, and I expressed that within the AV7 presentation. But there are some fundamentals, and not least is asking people who want to stay in the EU, who makes EU law? And even when I asked this question at AV7, it was very, very clear that even people who have a pretty good awareness of the geopolitical arena still do not know who actually sets EU legislation. And there's not a simple answer. I mean, officially, it's the EU Commission and the Council of Ministers, but even that is not necessarily totally factual. And of course, here on this graphic, we have the lies started right from the get-go. It was Ted Heath who lied to the British people through 1973 and 1974. And of course, after the 3-day week of 74, he was ousted from power. And I think it was, eventually it was Harold Wilson who held the 1975 referendum where allegedly the British public voted to formally ratify the membership to what was believed to be the European Economic Community. But of course, as we now know, it was always going to be a lot more than that. And, one of the concerns that people have is the advancing TTIP legislation. And, TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, and of course, the other side of the world, it's TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But this is legislation that is effectively being driven by lobbyists who are effectively on the corporate payroll. And of course, TTIP is a raft of legislation that will grant supremacy over EU and national law. Now, EU law already has supremacy over national law, and the legislation established under TTIP would grant the corporatocracy legal supremacy over all other law. And who drives this? The lobby groups. And, this is from some independent research. So 88% of the lobbyists working in Brussels and Strasbourg are corporate lobby groups. 9% are public interest groups, that's NGOs, non-government organizations that are supposedly independent, but if you actually look at who funds them, although they get some funding from private donations, a lot of their funding comes from foundations like the Rockefellers, the Rowntrees, the Cadburys, etc. So in many cases, the NGOs are effectively controlled opposition because, there's going to be some opposition, so you might as well get in there and control it and manage it. And this is how we operate, or how the EU effectively foists the legislation on the people. So the EU institutions, there's no hierarchy, there's no formal structure. And the reality is that the vast majority of the legislation emanates from the bureaucrats. So it's the lobbyists who promote their particular agenda to the bureaucrats. Obviously, they know which bureaucrats have the influence, which bureaucrats have the ear of the game makers within the commission and the council of ministers. And a lot of what goes on within the commission and the council of ministers is simply rubber stamping. And this is what the people who want to remain in the EU want to sustain. And anything, I can absolutely guarantee that anything that makes people think that staying in the EU is a good idea is purely the sugarcoating on the cyanide. So, as I made the observation AV7, I've certainly used the environmental legislation, the European Water Framework Directive, the European Convention on Human Rights. I've used them in court in recent months. Be crazy not to while we have access to them. But this is just a very, very small part of the 122,000 pieces of EU legislation that have effectively been implemented since the European Union was established in 1957. Barely 20,000 of those pieces of legislation have come onto the UK statute books, and that's purely because there simply isn't enough civil servants to rubber stamp the legislation into UK law. But it doesn't matter anyway, because within UK legislation, it's clearly established that EU law has supremacy. So this vote on the 23rd of June is quite possibly the last opportunity for the people of the UK to establish that they really want to live in a democracy as opposed to live in an environment where the legislation is effectively driven by the corporations through faceless bureaucrats. And if anybody ever tells you that the European Parliament has a role in legislation, then please simply ask them to do some research. The European Parliament is nothing more than a talking shop. It's a consultative body to give the impression that there is some democratic process. Why is it that MEPs don't tell us this? Well, they do. If you listen to the likes of Nigel Farage of UKIP or Daniel Hannan, Conservative, and you listen to what they have to say, then you will know that the MEPs have zero influence. It's part of the charade. And how do the rest of them keep quiet about it? Well, it's real easy, of course, because they get their salary, they get an allowance they don't even have to account for of 3,500 euros a month. And then on top of that, they can put in other expenses, including claiming for business class travel when they're flying Ryanair or whatever other bucket flights they get. So they're on the gravy train. Just take a look at the likes of the Kinnocks. Look how much money these working class people have made out of other people's misery over the last couple of decades. So this is how they're able to maintain their silence. Well, the reality is that, here's a few of the people that want Britain to stay in the EU. Obama, Tony Blair, George Osborne, Pope Francis, Hillary Clinton, of course, her husband, apparently, Bill, Angela Merkel, and David Cameron. So on the basis that I'm sure the vast majority of people would not trust these individuals any further than they can throw them over their left shoulder. So why would you give them credence over their recommendation to stay in the EU? Well, all we can ever do is simply ask people to do their research. And when I hear people say, oh, we must stay in because, otherwise the environmental agenda, would be pushed through and, the UK would be environmentally destroyed. It's going to be destroyed anyway, unless people get off their backsides and actually do something about it. More of that later on Fracking Nightmare. You think the EU is going to prevent the corporations from stripping this country of its mineral resources. It hasn't stopped them anywhere else. It's just that they've been able to do it without the people kicking off. Meanwhile, what do you think is going on in France right now? The mainstream media seems to be conveniently ignoring the fact that for the last 3 months now, the French have been in a state of civil unrest right across the whole country. Why? Because the French government is looking to make a number of changes, not least changing the 35-hour working week. So once again, when I hear people saying, but it's only because of the EU that we have employment safeguards. Employment safeguards, we have more people on 0 hours contracts and minimum wage in this country than ever before. And a big part of this, of course, is due to the mass immigration. And I discuss this in the AB7 presentation. I make it very clear that I absolutely have no issue with the people that come to this country with every intention of bettering the lives for themselves and their families. Because we would too. If we knew of a country in the world which we could get to by hook or by crook, where for a basic working week we could earn 7 or 8 times the basic wage in this country. The average wage in this country is allegedly around about £22,500 per annum. But imagine if you could go somewhere where the average wage was £150,000 per annum, about 7.5 times what it is here. Of course, people would make the effort to go there, even if it was only for a short term, because you could live quite reasonably in that country and also send money home, and you'd only have to send 1/7 of your earnings home for your family to be able to enjoy the lifestyle that they would have if you were earning minimum wage in this country. And that's exactly what the people that are coming here and looking to come here are coming here for, because they can earn a basic wage that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times more than they can earn in their own country. So CEOs and shareholders of the corporations think it's great. Flood the country with the cheap labor, because that way we can reduce the labor costs and enhance the profitability of the companies and increase the share price. Automation, of course, is doing that as well. So we're going to end up, not just this country, but many other countries as well, we're going to end up with a situation where there is a bunch of parasites who are living off the backs of the rest of the country, where people are struggling to keep a roof over their head, keep food on the table for their family, and have any kind of quality of life. And those people who say, "Oh, no, you're exaggerating." Really? Step outside of suburbia. Go take a look in some of the northern cities and look at the way in which people are just about scratching a living. Well, interestingly, the polls are showing, this is polls that were released earlier today, are actually showing that the Brexit camp actually has the lead. So let's just take a look at this very short video that was released earlier today. So there you have it. 45% are looking to leave. In the video it said 43%. Actually, the covering graphic says 41%. So a 2 or 3% lead. But don't be misled by this, because it's very, very clear the British establishment has now got a lot of practice in the manipulation of votes. So on the 23rd, if you have an opportunity to go to the town hall or wherever is being used as the returning office in your area, and if you can get in there to monitor the count, please do so, because there will be a manipulation. whatever way it comes out, it's going to be close. And of course, there's already talk that if it's extremely close, then the predominance of Remain MPs in Parliament will simply ignore the vote. And this is exactly, of course, what has been done everywhere else. When the population has not got it right first time, they've either been forced to vote again or the vote has simply been ignored. And there's the very real risk that that is what is going to happen here. So once again, it comes down to people getting involved. And I'm going to be talking a bit more about this on Fracking Nightmare later this evening. But, you know, we have a horrendous situation of political apathy. And, you know, there's many, many reasons for this. But, you know, back in 1968, and I think this cartoon here absolutely sums it up really well. Of course, 1968 was the year of discontent around the world, particularly amongst the students in France, in the US, here in the UK. It was quite possibly the last time that we saw any serious political activism amongst the youth of the country. I was a little bit too young to participate in activism back then, but as you know, time has worn on, you know, we've all been lulled into this sense of, oh, well, everything's okay, everything's going to work out, or there's nothing we can do, so we might as well just get on and, you know, make the best of it. Well, the reality is that those days are well and truly over. And if we don't get involved, then the reality is that we are going to be condemning future generations to lives of, well, in my opinion, some pretty serious abject misery. Because, you know, we're already, take a look around you, we're already looking at a situation where, you know, the young generation are starting working life in horrendous debt because of college fees and university fees. And even those that don't go to college, you know, they're struggling to get anything more than minimum wage. And the other trend that is absolutely immoral is this of free working. I was speaking to somebody the other day and they were telling me that they got a job, and I thought that's fantastic, you know, because this person had been looking for work for about a year, and they said, yeah, but I got to work for the first 2 weeks for free. It's my induction. I mean, what is this all about? You know, you tell me that an employer can actually sleep at night knowing that a person cannot get benefits because they are working, but they're working for free. You know, this is sociopathic. And the mindset, the mentality of the corporatocracy is literally sociopathic. I doubt that anyone watching this is a head of HR or a CEO or a CFO. But if you are, then how do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night knowing that you have a very healthy salary check and I'm all right, Jack, but there are people in the communities where you are allegedly providing employment who you are literally taking advantage of? What you are creating is modern day slavery. And you are helping to perpetrate that agenda. And I completely understand you probably don't have the balls to actually challenge your corporate policy, because the reason that you got where you are is because you're a yes man or woman. Yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. How can we screw the workers even more? How can we automate more jobs? And that makes you feel real good. You must be very, very proud of yourself. So what do you do when you come home and you say to your children, you know, I had a great day at work today because we laid off 150, 200, 300, 500, 5,000 people because we were able to enhance the profitability of the company through automation. Or we've laid off 300 people because we've discovered that we can actually get 300 people from the job centre on work placement schemes, on induction. This is supposedly a developed nation. It's supposedly the first world, yet it is also described as the most corrupt country on the planet. And really, that's no accolade. At least in other countries, in the developing world, the corruption is above the table. They don't try and hide it. Here, we pretend. We pretend that, we're full of integrity, that everything we do is illegal and above board. And yet, we have more tax havens and we have more corporate leaders and political leaders taking advantage of those tax havens than probably anywhere else on the planet. You know what? It disgusts me. Absolutely disgusts me, and it should disgust you too. Well, I'm going to get the opportunity a couple of times at least to express my concerns at public meetings. So if you want to debate with me, if you want to participate in a discussion and a lively debate about the merits of either remaining or leaving the EU, then come join me. I'm going to be speaking at an event in Leeds this coming Saturday. That's Saturday the 11th of June. The event runs from noon till 5 o'clock. There's I think about 4 or so other speakers. But I have no idea what the schedule is, but they go 12 noon to 5 p.m. Next Saturday afternoon, that's at the White Rose Banqueting Suite, 67 Tong Road, Leeds, LS 12 1HQ. And hopefully, we're going to be discussing a number of issues beyond the EU. We're going to be looking, it's organised by Real Change Leeds. And so, the speaker's going to be looking at the ways in which these communities are bringing about real change. These are genuine activists. They're not keyboard warriors. They're not commentators. They are out there on the streets making a difference. And I think the Real Change movement has got some legs, because I've seen that there's now Real Change Nottingham, Real Change Manchester, and I believe soon to be a Real Change Hull. And there may be others that I'm not aware of. So I think this is an activist movement that's got some potential. So if you're in the Leeds area or can travel to Leeds next Saturday, please come and join us. Then 2 days before the referendum, I will be at Truth Juice in Birmingham, and that's at 8 p.m, Tuesday 21st of June, Midsummer's Day. And that's at the E57 Social Club, 699 Ulster Road South, Birmingham, B14 5EY. 2 days before the referendum. I think we'll have a pretty good handle at that point on the general consensus around the country. And so, we'll also be able to get a feel for just how much effort the establishment has to put into fixing the vote. Now, please do watch my AV7 presentation, because although I've said the vote will be fixed, it may not be fixed in quite the way that most people are thinking. And I think we have to be prepared for the aftermath, because I think the aftermath of the referendum is not going to be pretty. So it's going to mean that we have to participate perhaps more than ever before. Well, finally, AV7. I've had a lot of inquiries about the AV7 DVDs. This was, without any shadow of doubt, for me, and I think for many others, the most enjoyable and informative AV event to date. A cross-section of the community, and everyone united by the realization and awareness that something isn't right, that something is clearly wrong with the entire fabric of our society, and it needs to be addressed. And although it was only 220 odd people, nonetheless, this is 220 people that are looking or already making significant contribution in their communities. And then finally, AV8, and the response after AV7 has been truly remarkable. More than half of the tickets for AV8 have already been purchased. And there will be an option, actually, for an extra night, for the Monday night. So we have a full day of workshops planned for AV8 next year. So details of that extra night will be an option for the 3 nights, as usual, and also for the 4th night for those that really want to make a full break of it and maximise the opportunity of being amongst like-minded people. Well, 2.5 weeks before the EU referendum, as is always the case, don't take my word for anything that I've said tonight. Please do your own research. Come to your own determination of what is best for this country and in the best interests of future generations. Thank you very much and good night.